Welcome to the debate. We are looking at a document today that acts as a mirror, and I'm not sure we're going to like the reflection. It's February 2026. The world has, well, it's shifted under our feet. Frontier AI, and when I use that term, I mean the massive reasoning-capable models that have integrated into everything, from legal analysis to software engineering, is no longer a novelty. It is the baseline. The question on the table today is simple to ask, but excruciatingly hard to answer. Is this technology a commercial product, a luxury good subject to the whims of the market, or has it crossed a silent threshold to become a public utility, as essential to modern citizenship as water, roads, or electricity?
It really is the defining economic question of the decade. And usually when we talk about this, we end up deep in the weeds of, antitrust law or venture capital returns. But the material we are reviewing today takes a completely different angle. It frames this economic reality not as a business strategy, but as a moral crisis. And it does it with a hook that, honestly, it caught me off guard. It opens with a confession.
It's startling. It really is. The text is titled Confession of a Founder. The narrator explicitly admits to, and I'm quoting here, enclosing a shared benefit into a private choke point. They argue that by gating their technology behind a subscription wall, that standard $20 a month model we all know, they aren't engaging in innovation. They are engaging in harm. They call it a betrayal of unalienable rights.
And it reads like a whistleblower manifesto from a guilty conscience. But then comes the twist, which is just crucial for our listeners to understand. The author reveals that this founder isn't a specific person. It's not a leaked diary from Sam Altman or Dario Amodei. The narrator is a composite character, a stand-in for the major AI labs like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google. The text uses this fictional confession to mirror the actual ethical position these companies find themselves in right now, today.
Reveals a very uncomfortable truth. The argument is that these companies have built something so essential, specifically regarding the ability to read, write, and understand code, that charging for it has become a, quote, categorical error. I am going to argue today, in line with the text, that AI literacy has become an unalienable right. The current model, where access to essential education is tiered based on your ability to pay, it harms society. It creates a class system in the one place we absolutely cannot afford to have one: the development of human potential.
I understand the moral gravity of that stance. I do. It's emotionally compelling to say, education for all. But I'm here to represent the reality check provided by that same text and, frankly, by the laws of physics and economics. We have to look at the costs. These tools did not appear out of thin air. The development costs for our frontier model are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Some projections for this year hitting the billion-dollar mark for a single training run. If you remove the market mechanism, the subscription, the product model, you don't magically get a public utility. You get a tool that degrades, breaks down, or, and this is the darker timeline that text warns about, turns into a surveillance machine to make its money back.
That is the standard defense, isn't it? We have to charge you to save you. But let's look at the position statement in the text more closely. The author makes a historical comparison that I think it completely dismantles that defense. They point out that in 1825, basic literacy, reading text, was the baseline for participation in society. If you couldn't read, your agency was limited. You were, a subject, not a citizen.
Sure, literacy is the bedrock of modern civilization. There's no argument there.
Is becoming infrastructure-level literacy. The argument is that if you cannot understand the systems that mediate your life, the algorithms determining your loan rates, your news feed, your medical care, you lack self-determination. And if that is true, if this skill has crossed the threshold into necessary education, then the tools that teach it, like Claude or Gemini, are utilities, not products. By treating them as products, we are violating what the text calls organic law.
Organic law. That is a very specific, very heavy legal philosophy to throw around.
It refers to the foundational principles of equality that, supersede statutes.
The argument is that even if these subscriptions are technically legal, which they obviously are, they violate the spirit of equal educational access. You cannot have self-governance if only the wealthy can afford the tools required to understand the governance systems.
I have to push back here. I don't buy that the existence of a price tag constitutes a violation of organic law. The text itself acknowledges the counterargument, and I think it's the stronger one. The founder, in the text, admits they have violated no statute. They are protecting intellectual property and charging for value created. I mean, that is the definition of a functioning economy. You create value, you capture value. If I invent a better mousetrap, I sell it. I don't give it away because pest control is a right.
A functioning economy, perhaps, but a dysfunctional society. And a mousetrap doesn't determine your economic future the way coding literacy does.
But look at the alternative the text warns against. The narrator says explicitly, free access without funding means the tool degrades or gets replaced by surveillance-based models. We've seen this movie before. Social media. When the product is free, the user is the product. At least with a subscription model, like Anthropic's current setup, the incentive is aligned. Build a better tool to keep the customer. The profit motive is what allowed this innovation to exist in the first place. You can't just wish away the costs of the infrastructure because you want the output to be a right.
That brings us right to the core of the debate, doesn't it? This concept of a categorical error. The text claims there is a distinction older than our current economy, the difference between a product and a utility.
Okay, let's dig into that, because I think this is where the argument gets a little slippery.
It uses the analogy of water versus a luxury watch. Water is a utility, a Rolex is a product. We understand that water falls outside of pure market logic because human dignity and survival depend on it. You don't charge market surge pricing for water during a drought if it means people die. The text argues we are making a category error by treating frontier AI like a luxury watch when it has actually become water.
That is a beautiful rhetorical flourish, but let's pressure test it. Water is a biological necessity. You die without it within 3 days. Is an AI coding assistant really in the same category as hydration? The text says roads aren't the same as restaurant meals. Agreed, but where do we draw the line? I'm not convinced by this line of reasoning because necessary education is a moving target. Is a graphing calculator a right? Is a laptop a right?
But that's exactly the point. The target has moved, and our classification hasn't caught up. The text explicitly traces this evolution. Once, basic literacy was enough. Then, as society became more complex, you needed secondary education. Then, higher learning became the prerequisite for economic participation. The advocate's position, my position here, is that we are at an inflection point. AI isn't just a calculator. It mediates how we write, how we research, how we build software. The text says to be unable to read code in 2026 is analogous to being unable to read text in 1825. If you accept that premise, then enclosing these tools restricts the constitutional principle of equal access.
I accept that the skill is valuable. I don't accept that the tool must therefore be free or state-provided. Food is essential for survival. More than coding, yet we have a market for food. We have a market for housing. We even have a market for education, private schools, textbooks, tutoring services. The text attempts to wave this away by saying those things don't, quote, violate organic law, but I would argue that educational markets are standard practice. Why is an AI subscription different from buying a textbook?
Because a textbook doesn't actively teach you, correct you, and write alongside you. A textbook is a static resource. Frontier AI is an active agent of capability. The text argues that when you have a tool that codes better than all existing alternatives, and you restrict it to those who can pay, you are actively structuring society for maximum capital extraction rather than human development. It's not just a market, it's a gate on citizenship.
Let's pivot to the practical side, because this is where the utility argument usually collapses in the real world. We need to talk about the sustainability argument found in the text.
It does bring that up. And I admit this is the hardest hurdle for the utility argument.
We aren't just talking about software development costs, like paying programmers' salaries. We are talking about inference costs. And I think we need to define that clearly because it changes the math entirely compared to old software.
For our listeners who might not be deep in the engineering weeds, break down inference costs.
Think of it this way. When you use Microsoft Word, the program runs on your computer. Microsoft pays to build it once, and then you run it.
But with Frontier AI, the brain is too big to fit on your laptop. Every time you ask a question, that data goes to a massive server farm where thousands of expensive chips roar to life to generate the answer. That burns electricity, that creates heat. It costs actual cash cents per query for the company. The text acknowledges this. Frontier AI costs hundreds of millions to train and millions a day to run. If we declare this a utility, where does that funding come from?
But that's the billion-dollar question.
Exactly. The text suggests public investment, comparing it to roads. But do we really think the public sector can fund and manage technology that changes every 6 months? If the government is paying the electric bill for every student's coding questions, the budget explodes.
The resource problem is real. I'm not denying that. But the text's response is that the solution is not commodification. It says roads cost billions. Water systems require maintenance. We solve this through public investment because it is an obligation. The argument is that we always find the money for things we deem essential. We spend billions on defense. We spend billions on highways. If AI literacy is essential for the future of the Republic, the funding model should look like the Department of Transportation, not Netflix.
What speed matters. That's the counterpoint the text wrestles with. Private innovation moves faster. The reason we have Claude 4.5 and GPT-5 right now is because these companies were in a race, fueled by private capital, chasing a return. If you turn this into a public utility, you remove the profit motive. You might slow down the very progress that makes the tool valuable in the first place. You risk stagnating the technology in a bureaucratic deadlock. Imagine if the DMV was in charge of updating ChatGPT.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the response in the source material? It asks a very sharp question. Faster toward what end?
Faster toward what end?
Precisely. The text asks whether we want capabilities to advance for the sake of advancement or for human flourishing. A slower public utility that ensures universal access might be superior to a lightning-fast private product that concentrates advantage in the hands of the few. The goal of education isn't efficiency, it's equity. The text argues we are prioritizing private accumulation over the organic principles of democratic education.
I see that, but I think there is a middle ground that the text glosses over initially, which brings us to the free tier objection. This is the part that I think most listeners are probably shouting at their speakers right now.
I was waiting for this. The freemium defense.
Well, it's the obvious solution, isn't it? Companies like Anthropic do offer free access. You can go use Claude right now without paying a dime. Doesn't this balance the sustainability needs of the company with the public's need for access? You get the utility, they get the premium users to pay that massive electric bill I mentioned.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. And neither does the source material. In fact, it rejects this vigorously. It says, quote, tiered access is not universal access.
But it is access. It's better than nothing.
It's degraded access. And we need to be technical about what degraded means here. The text argues that the free versions are intentionally limited. They are slower, less capable, and crucially, have smaller context windows.
Explain context window in the specific educational context.
The context window is the AI's short-term memory. A paid model might be able to read an entire textbook or analyze 1,000 lines of code at once. The free model might only remember the last 10 paragraphs of conversation. So if you're a student trying to debug a complex program, the free AI literally forgets what you're talking about halfway through. Plus, the free models hallucinate more.
Hallucinate meaning they make things up?
Exactly. They invent code libraries that don't exist. They give confident wrong answers. They are designed to create upgrade pressure. In a consumer product like Spotify, that's fine. If you want ad-free music, you pay. But we are talking about education.
So? What does that matter in a classroom?
Imagine a classroom right now in 2026. You have 2 students working on a final coding project. Student A has the pro version, the frontier model that explains bugs, refactors code, maintains context across the whole project, and teaches deeper architectural concepts. Student B has the free version, the older model that hallucinates, forgets the code from the previous prompt, and hits a usage cap after 5 messages. The text calls this market stratification. You are baking inequality into the learning process itself.
The educational outcome is inequitable not because of ability, but because of subscription status.
It creates a capability gap. I acknowledge that. That is a real problem.
It creates a chasm. The text says, when education is a genuine right, there are no tiers. You don't get premium math and free math in public school where the free math textbook has the wrong answers in the back.
Well, actually, in the real world, you kind of do. Wealthy districts have better resources, better labs, better teacher-to-student ratios than poor districts. That's a reality we live with. But I want to push back on the idea that the only solution is the state seizing the means of production. Couldn't we see integration as a middle ground? Schools pay for licenses, just like they buy textbooks. Why does it have to be binary? Public utility or harm? Why can't the state just be a customer?
That leads us to the most fascinating part of the text, the mechanism of change. The author argues that integration is actually a forcing function that will break the current model.
Explain that. The text calls it structural mechanics.
The idea is that as AI becomes standard infrastructure, as it moves from cool tech to essential tutor, the tiered access model becomes structurally untenable. The text argues that schools simply cannot function with that baked-in inequality. You can't have a curriculum that assumes AI assistance if half the class is on a broken, capped version. It breaks the lesson plan.
So the pressure comes from the teachers?
It comes from necessity, not choice. The text draws a parallel to electricity. Electricity began as a luxury for the wealthy, a parlor trick for lighting mansions. But as society reorganized around it, as factories and homes were built assuming electricity existed, it had to become a utility. Not because the power companies were nice, but because societal function required it. You couldn't run a modern city if power was only available to the highest bidder on a Tuesday.
I have to admit the historical precedent is strong there. Telecommunications followed the same path. Phones were luxuries, then they became essential for emergency services and jobs, and eventually, universal service became a mandate. You couldn't have a society where you couldn't call 911 because you were on the free tier.
Exactly. The text argues AI education is approaching this threshold right now. The pedagogical advantage of the paid tools is becoming so significant that the gap is visible and measurable. The argument is that this pressure will build from the bottom up. Teachers, parents, communities refusing to accept that their children are locked out of essential literacy. Eventually, the private tiered model collapses under the weight of its own inequality.
So the prediction is that private models will either transform into utilities or be replaced by open alternatives that serve that function.
Yes, because as the text puts it, the more essential AI becomes to education, the less tolerable exclusionary pricing becomes. It's a paradox for the companies. The more successful they are at making their tool essential, the less they will be able to justify charging for it as a luxury.
It's a fascinating theory of change. It relies on the idea that the inequality will become so intolerable that it forces a systemic shift.
Which brings us to the conclusion. Where do we stand?
Look, stepping back, I still have reservations. The text is idealistic. It assumes that if we just label something a utility, the massive logistical and financial hurdles of maintaining frontier AI will simply be solved by public obligation. I worry that without the aggressive, capital-intensive competition between Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI, innovation stalls. I worry about the Department of Motor Vehicles version of ChatGPT, slow, outdated, and frustrating. But I have to acknowledge the moral weight of the argument. If AI literacy is indeed as fundamental as reading, and I think we are getting close to that, then the current product model is ethically precarious.
I think ethically precarious is putting it mildly. I want to take us back to that confession logic one last time. Remember, the author used that confession to mirror the position of these companies. The narrator says, I built something that codes better than all existing alternatives, and that I chose profit over principle.
And the text asserts Anthropic and others have made the same choice.
The central tension here is clear. It is a choice between education as product and education as utility, between access as privilege and access as right. We are watching a transformation of human capability, and we are currently allowing it to be distributed by market logic.
The text closes with a challenge to the collective. It asks if we will allow that choice to stand. It suggests that we are prioritizing profit over the organic principles of democratic education.
And that is where we leave you. Is this technology a luxury watch, something beautiful and useful that you buy if you can afford it? Or is it water, something so fundamental to life and dignity that denying it to anyone is a moral failure? The text argues that we've enclosed a commons that should not be enclosed.
A provocative stance on a technology that is rewriting the rules of our society.
Thank you for listening to The Debate.
Until next time.
Okay, let's unpack this. I have a document in front of me today that is, honestly, it's a little bit haunting.
Haunting is a good word for it.
I really didn't sleep well after reading it, to be honest. It's titled AI Literacy, From Private Product to Public Utility. And I know, just from the title, you might be reaching for the skip button.
Oh, for sure. It sounds dry.
You're thinking, great, a policy paper. Sounds like homework.
It does sound a bit like something you'd find in a dusty filing cabinet in Brussels, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you open it, and the very first thing you encounter isn't a graph. It isn't a statistic about GDP or compute costs.
Yeah.
It isn't even a standard introduction.
No, it's a confession.
It's a confession. And I don't mean we made a mistake in our Q3 earnings kind of corporate confession. I mean a full-on, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned style confession.
It is a confession in the truest, almost literary sense of the word. It's not an apology, which is, usually about managing reputation. This is an admission of a specific structural guilt. And it sets the stage for everything we're going to discuss because it personalizes what is usually a very abstract corporate conversation.
Right. It starts with this voice a tech founder. We don't know who yet. And they are talking about this incredible tool they've built. And usually when founders talk about their tools, it's all we're changing the world and we're making the future.
A lot of hype.
And this starts that way. They say, I didn't just build something useful. They claim they've built something that democratizes a skill that is fundamental to economic participation, basically a superpower.
But then comes the turn, the pivot, and it's a sharp one.
The pivot is brutal. They admit that by gating this tool behind a subscription, by doing the most normal business thing in the world, charging $20 a month for it, they aren't just doing business. They say, and this is a direct quote, I enclosed a shared benefit into a private choke point.
I want to pause on that phrase, private choke point.
Me too?
Because that is not business language. That is not something you hear in an MBA class. That is military strategy language.
Yeah, that stopped me cold. When I hear choke point, I think of the Straits of Hormuz. I think of the Suez Canal. Or, I don't know, that battle in the movie 300.
Exactly. A choke point is a narrow passage where you can control the flow of something vital. In war, it's ships or supplies. In this context, the founder is saying they have created a choke point for what? For intelligence, for capability.
For human potential, basically.
Yes. They are saying, I built a bridge to the future, and then I set up a toll booth that only some people can afford.
And they go even further. This isn't just about being a greedy capitalist. They say, that isn't innovation, it's harm. Serving capitalism over unalienable rights.
Whoa.
That is a heavy, heavy way to start a document. Unalienable rights. That's Declaration of Independence stuff. So today, our mission is to dive into this confession. We need to understand what this founder built, why on earth they feel so guilty about selling it. Because, spoiler alert, selling things is legal, and here is where it gets really interesting. We need to talk about the twist.
The twist is everything.
Because this founder isn't exactly who you think they are.
Right. And if we zoom out for just a second, this isn't just about one person feeling bad about their pricing model. This deep dive is really a fundamental questioning of how our society handles necessary education in a technological age.
Okay.
We are going to explore a core tension, the conflict between standard business practice, which is, protecting your IP, keeping the lights on, satisfying shareholders, and something the source calls organic law.
Organic law.
Which deals with the fundamental rights of a human being to learn and to govern themselves.
It's the clash between I have a right to make a profit because I built this, and you have a right to learn this because you need it to survive.
Precisely. And the argument we're going to unpack today is that AI, specifically the kind of AI that teaches coding and facilitates high-level literacy, has crossed a threshold. The argument is that it has moved from being a luxury product, like a Rolex or a Tesla, to becoming a necessary public utility.
Like what?
Like water, electricity, or the interstate highway system. And if that is true, the implications for companies like Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI are absolutely staggering.
So buckle up. We are going from a founder's guilty conscience to the constitutional definition of a public utility. Let's go back to the text. The source material opens with this narrative hook. The founder writes, I didn't just build something useful. By denying competitors access and gating use by subscription, I enclosed a shared benefit.
They're not pulling any punches. They are admitting to building a tool that is effectively a superpower and then hoarding it.
Notice the specific language they use to describe the tool's impact. They don't say, I build a productivity app that saves you 10 minutes a day.
No.
They say, I built something that democratizes a skill fundamental to economic participation. They are talking of the ability to function in the modern economy. Not just thrive, but function.
And that's a huge claim.
It is. But then they ask this question that I think every listener is probably asking right now. The founder admits, I am serving capitalism over unalienable rights. But then they pause and ask, but am I in trouble?
And this is where we have to put on our lawyer hats for a second. The answer, legally speaking, is a resounding no.
Right. I mean, I read that and my first thought was, buddy, you didn't break the law. You started a sauce company. It's the American dream.
Exactly. This is crucial to the source's argument. The founder acknowledges that they haven't violated any statute. They haven't broken any SEC regulation. What they have done is standard practice.
It's business 101. You make a thing, you patent the thing, you sell the thing.
You build a moat.
You try to create a moat around your business so competitors can't steal your lunch. That's what investors tell you to do.
Correct. Protect intellectual property, charge for value created, prevent competitors from using your tech. The source explicitly says, this is how markets work. This is how companies survive. If you went to a venture capitalist and said, I built this amazing thing and I'm going to give it away because of unalienable rights, they would laugh you out of the boardroom.
It's called security.
They might.
So if they're following the rules, if they're doing exactly what the market rewards, why the guilt? Why write this confession? The source says there is a gnawing question.
The gnawing question comes from the nature of the product itself. The founder realizes they didn't build just any product. They didn't build a better way to order pizza.
Right.
They built something that codes better than all existing alternatives. And because, and we'll get into this, coding is becoming the language of power, the language of agency, they realize they have built an educational tool of genuine significance.
And then, as the text says, I locked it behind a paywall.
That is the crux of the moral dilemma. If you build a better mousetrap and charge for it, nobody cares. If you build a really nice video game and charge for it, nobody cares.
It's a luxury. It's entertainment.
But if you build a cure for a disease or a tool that makes a person capable of citizenship and you charge for it, suddenly the moral calculus shifts. The ground moves under your feet.
The source creates this fascinating dialogue in the founder's head. They start defending themselves, almost like they're arguing with a ghost. They say, look, development costs were enormous. Ongoing infrastructure demands continuous capital.
Which is true.
And I want to stick up for the founder here for a second. That's true, isn't it? We aren't talking about a lemonade stand. These AI models cost billions to train.
It is absolutely true. The source acknowledges the economic reality. Sustainability requires revenue. If you give it away for free with no funding, the tool degrades, it disappears, the servers go offline.
Or, arguably worse, it turns into a surveillance-based model.
Yes, where the user isn't the customer, but the product selling their data to advertisers.
Right. We've seen that movie before. Social media is free, and look how that turned out. Free usually means we are tracking every keystroke you make. So the founder is sitting there thinking, I have to charge, I have to keep the servers running, I have to pay my engineers. The economics are real.
But then the source pivots. It asks a dangerous question. What if that framework itself is the problem?
What if the economic reality is a choice, not a law of physics?
Exactly. What if the framework that assumes education must be a product to survive is flawed? The framework that assumes learning is a service that must be sold to be sustainable.
It challenges the idea that access to human development should be tiered according to ability to pay.
And that is a radical thought in our current economy. We're used to better service for more money, first class versus economy, VIP versus general admission.
Of course.
But the source is suggesting that when it comes to the tools that allow you to be a functional citizen, that tiering is morally wrong. It's suggesting that there are some things you just shouldn't be allowed to put a pro sticker on.
Okay, so we had this founder sweating bullets, realizing they might be the villain in their own story. But now we have to drop the other shoe.
The big reveal.
Because as I was reading this, I kept playing the guessing game. I'm Googling quotes. I'm thinking, is this Mark Zuckerberg having a crisis of conscience? Is this Sam Altman writing a diary entry?
Laughs. It certainly sounds like the kind of thing they might think about at 3 a.m., but no.
So who is it? Who is this tormented founder?
It's a narrative device.
It is, and here is the reveal. The author of the source material admits, I use this exercise to put myself in the position Anthropic is in.
And there it is. The founder is a stand-in for Anthropic, the creators of the AI model Claude.
This blew my mind. I actually had to read that sentence twice. So the author isn't saying, I am the CEO of Anthropic. They are saying, I am observing what has already been created and enclosed by companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google.
It's a powerful literary technique. By personifying the company as a conflicted individual, the source forces us to look at the moral weight of corporate decisions.
That's a great point.
Corporations are usually faceless. They have policies, not consciences. They have fiduciary duties, not moral guilt. But by turning Anthropic into a person for a moment, the author makes us ask, if a person did this, would we think they were a jerk?
That makes sense. But why Anthropic specifically? Why pick on them? They're usually the ones talking about safety and constitutional AI and being the good guys.
I think that's exactly why the author chose them. It's easy to paint some tech companies as villains. It fits a narrative. But Anthropic explicitly positions itself as the ethical AI lab.
They trade on that reputation.
They do. They are the ones who say they care about alignment and social impact. So if they are locking this essential utility behind a paywall, the contradiction is even sharper. It makes the problem systemic, not just about one bad company.
Fair point. If the good guys are doing it, maybe the whole system is broken. Now let's talk about what it actually is. The source is very specific about the capabilities of Claude. It says Claude teaches code better than previous alternatives. It assists with writing. It aids research.
Right. We need to be clear about what we're discussing. We aren't just talking about a chatbot that writes funny poems or gives you a recipe for banana bread.
Though it can do that too.
It can, but we are talking about a tool that can guide a complete novice through building complex software. It can explain dense legal topics. It acts as a universal, patient, infinitely knowledgeable tutor.
The source argues that these companies have created transformative educational tech, maybe the most transformative since the printing press. But they've structured access around profit maximization rather than universal provision.
That's the enclosure mentioned in the title. Think of the enclosure movement in history, where common land that everyone used for grazing was suddenly fenced off by rich landowners for their private use.
And the peasants were just locked out.
They were locked out. The source argues they've taken a commons knowledge, capability, the ability to manipulate the digital world, and put a fence around it with the subscription lock on the gate.
And this brings us to the historical analogy, which I think is one of the strongest, most vivid parts of this argument. The source compares the timeline of 1825 to 2025 regarding literacy.
I love this comparison because it grounds the abstract tech talk in something visceral, something we can all understand.
So walk us through it. In 1825, if you couldn't read text, where did that leave you? What was your life like?
In 1825, being unable to read text was a profound limitation on your agency. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Imagine you were a farmer. You can't read the contract for your land.
Someone could be cheating you, and you'd have no idea.
None. You can't read the laws that govern you. You are completely at the mercy of the person who reads them to you. You can't read the Bible, which might be the center of your community's moral and social life.
You are dependent on others to interpret the world for you. If the merchant tells you the contract says X, you have to believe him. You have no choice.
Exactly. You are, in a very real sense, a second-class citizen. You have less power, you have less protection, you have less voice.
And the source argues that in 2025, code is the new text.
That is the core argument. Code is now infrastructure-level literacy. Think about your life today. Algorithms determine if you get a loan. Algorithms determine what news you see on your feed. Algorithms determine if your resume even gets seen by a human.
It's everywhere.
Software mediates almost every interaction we have with the world, from ordering food to applying for a job to, falling in love.
So if you can't understand code, or at least if you can't use the tools that allow you to interact with code and build with it, you are the 1825 farmer. All over again.
That is the claim. To be unable to read code in 2025 is analogous to being unable to read text in 1825. It's a limitation on your ability to shape the forces acting upon you. You are just a passive consumer of the digital world, not a participant. You are being acted upon.
That's a scary thought. We're all just clicking buttons we don't understand, hoping the black box treats us nicely.
And if that premise is true, if code literacy is essential for agency, then access to the tool that teaches you code isn't a luxury, it's a necessity.
This is where the source introduces the concept of the categorical error. I want to dig into this because it feels central to the whole deep dive.
It is central. The source argues we are making a category mistake. We are looking at an AI subscription, and our brain says product, like Netflix,
Right.
like Spotify.
Something I buy for my convenience or entertainment.
Right, but the source says, no, look closer, that's a utility.
So, distinguish those for me. Because to me, everything I buy is a product. A bottle of water is a product, right? I pay for it at the store.
Sure, a bottle of Dasani is a product. But water access to your home is a utility. Let's break it down. Think about a luxury watch, a Rolex. If I can't afford a Rolex, my feelings might be hurt, I might be jealous, but my dignity isn't harmed.
My life goes on.
Your life goes on. You can still participate in democracy, you can still get a job, you can still function in society.
Right. Society doesn't collapse because I wear a Casio.
Exactly. That is a product. It follows pure market logic. If you have the money, you get the shiny thing. If you don't, you don't. And in a capitalist system, that's considered fair.
But a utility.
Utilities are things like water, roads, electricity, sanitation. These are things that fall outside pure market logic because human dignity and a functioning society depend on them.
You can't opt out.
You can't opt out. You cannot have a democracy if people are dying of thirst because they can't afford their water bill. You cannot have an economy if people can't get to work because there are no roads. These are preconditions for a functioning society.
And the source places education squarely in that utility category.
Yes, and it provides historical context that is really important here. The American experiment, and really the modern democratic experiment, generally enshrined education not just as a nice-to-have benefit, but as a necessity for self-governance.
The logic being, you can't have a republic if everyone is an idiot.
Laughed bluntly put, yes. Thomas Jefferson and others argued that an ignorant population cannot sustain a republic. If the people are the rulers, the people must be educated. Therefore, education cannot be a privilege reserved for the rich. It has to be a right available to all.
But wait, playing devil advocate here. Back in Jefferson's day, didn't that just mean, like, learning to read, write, and do basic ciphering? The 3 R's.
Exactly, and that leads to the expanding boundary theory mentioned in the text. This is a crucial concept. What counts as necessary education isn't static. It's not frozen in 1776. It shifts.
Okay.
In the 1800s, basic literacy was the boundary. That was enough to be a citizen. You could read a newspaper, read the ballot.
Then the world got more complicated. The Industrial Revolution happened.
Right. Suddenly, you needed to understand mechanics, maybe some chemistry. Then we moved to the information age. Secondary education, high school became essential. You needed more math, more history, more science just to hold a decent job and vote intelligently. The boundary expanded. We made high school free and compulsory.
And the source is saying we just hit another expansion point right now.
Yes, the technological inflection point. The argument is that we have crossed the threshold where coding literacy or AI literacy is now the baseline. It's the new minimum. If you don't have it, you are below the line of competency for modern citizenship.
The source draws a hard line here. It says, utilities essential to equal participation cannot be legitimately enclosed for private gain.
That is the categorical error. We are treating a utility, AI literacy tools, as a product, a SaaS subscription. We are putting a price tag on citizenship.
Okay, I hear that. And in theory, it sounds noble. It sounds right. But I have to push back. The source anticipates this, but I want to make it real. We allow private schools. I went to a public school, but my cousin went to a fancy private school. He had better textbooks. He had smaller class sizes.
A clear advantage.
We allow textbook publishers to make money. I spent a fortune on Pearson textbooks in college. Why is this different? Why is AI special?
This is where we get into the section on organic law. And I'm glad you pushed back, because this is where the argument gets risky and philosophically dense. It distinguishes between what is legal and what is lawful.
Okay, hold on. You're throwing around legal versus lawful. That sounds like sovereign citizen conspiracy stuff. I'm traveling, not driving. Is that what we're talking about here?
Laughs. No.
Because Anthropic is a private company. They can charge what they want. It's perfectly legal. How is that unlawful in any real sense?
No, we are not talking about gold fringe on flags. We are talking about constitutional theory. Legal refers to statutes, regulations, the current rules on the books. As the founder admitted, what Anthropic is doing is perfectly legal, no question.
Okay, good. Check it.
But lawful, in this philosophical context, refers to alignment with organic constitutional principles, the foundational principles of the society, the why behind the what.
Organic laws. So we're talking about the bedrock stuff.
Yeah.
The spirit of the law, not just the letter.
Yes, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the principles of human equality and unalienable rights. The source argues that just because a business model is legal, you can charge a subscription. That doesn't mean it aligns with the obligations of a society that claims to value equality.
So something can be legal but unlawful in the sense that it betrays the spirit of the nation. It's a violation of the social contract.
Exactly. It violates the social contract. And the source uses a brilliant thought experiment to illustrate this, the illiteracy cure.
Oh, this one stuck with me. This is the part where I really started to get what the author meant. It made it click.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so imagine a pharmaceutical company or a tech company invents a technology, let's say a pill or a special headset, that instantly solves illiteracy. You take it and boom, you can read perfectly. Or it accelerates reading instruction by 100 times.
It's an absolute miracle for humanity. It would change the world overnight.
Right. But then the company that invented it restricts it to premium subscribers. Only people who pay $1,000 a month get the cure for illiteracy. Everyone else has to struggle with phonics for 10 years, the old-fashioned way.
No, in a pure market framework, that's fine. They invented it, they own the patent, they can sell it for whatever the market will bear. It's a luxury product.
But how would we, as a society, actually react to that?
Maybe fear.
There would be riots. It would feel gross. It would feel like a betrayal of some fundamental human principle, even if no law was broken.
The source calls it a perversion. We would recognize that literacy is too fundamental to be left to pure market distribution. To withhold the ability to read based on money feels wrong in our gut. It feels unlawful, even if it's legal.
And the source says this is exactly what is happening with AI right now.
Precisely. If AI is the illiteracy cure for the digital age, if it is the best, fastest, most effective way to learn the language of the future, then restricting it to premium tiers is a betrayal. The source says, to deliberately create bias in access is to prioritize private wealth accumulation over the constitutional principle of equal educational access.
It creates a caste system. The haves get the super tutor that teaches them to code and build empires.
Yeah.
The have-nots get the dumb version.
Yeah.
The one that gives you wrong answers half the time.
Or nothing. And the source uses the teacher analogy to drive this home. The teacher who teaches for money creates education that is tiered. The teacher who teaches for learning creates education that must be free.
That is a bumper sticker right there. But let's get real for a second. We've been very high-minded and philosophical. But the companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, they aren't charities. They have bills to pay. And huge ones.
Massive ones.
And the source actually engages with the standard objections. It doesn't just ignore the business reality.
No, it lists 3 standard objections. And they are the objections any rational person, any investor, any CFO would raise immediately.
Let's go through them, and I want to really dig in because I struggle with this part. Objection number 1, the cost argument. We touched on this. AI costs hundreds of millions, maybe billions to build. You need massive data centers. You need NVIDIA H100 chips that cost $30,000 a pop.
The compute costs are eye-watering.
Right. You can't just give it away. If you do, you go bankrupt. Game over.
The source's response is fascinating. It doesn't deny the cost. It leans into it. It says, this is true of all utilities.
Oh, right. Roads aren't cheap. The power grid isn't cheap.
Think about it. The interstate highway system cost, in today's money, over $500 billion. Water treatment plants cost billions. The electrical grid requires constant, massive investment in copper, transformers, power plants. But we don't say, well, building this road was expensive, so only rich people can drive on it.
Well, we have toll roads, but I get your point. The main arteries are public. They have to be.
We solve the cost problem through public investment. We treat it as a societal obligation. The source argues the resource problem is real, but the solution is not to commodify necessities. It's to fund them as we fund other utilities.
So tax dollars.
Yeah.
Or some kind of public funding model.
Exactly. If it's infrastructure, the state pays for it because the state needs it to function. The return on investment isn't profit, it's a functioning society.
But wait, does the government have the competence to build this? I mean, do we want the DMV running ChatGPT? That sounds like a nightmare.
That's a common fear, but look at history. The internet itself started as a government project, ARPANET. GPS is a military and therefore government project that we all use for free.
That's a quick.
The core technologies often come from public investment because private companies won't take the long-term, high-risk bets. The source isn't saying the government has to write the code, but that the government has to guarantee the access. Maybe it's a public-private partnership. Maybe it's a heavily regulated utility like the power company.
Okay, I can see that. Public funding, private execution maybe. But let's look at objection number 2. The innovation speed argument. This is the Silicon Valley mantra. Profit motive drives speed.
Move fast and break things.
Right. If you take away the potential to become a trillion-dollar company, innovation slows down. Sam Altman goes home. We won't get GPT-5 or Claude 4 as fast. We fall behind.
And the source asks a very poignant, almost Zen question in response. Faster toward what end?
Oof, that stops you in your tracks.
It challenges the assumption that speed is the only metric that matters, or even the most important one. It sets up a contrast between human flourishing and private accumulation.
And are those two things always the same?
The source argues they are often in conflict. A slower public utility, maybe we get the AI a year later, maybe it's developed more carefully with more safety checks, might be better for human flourishing than a fast private product that concentrates advantage in the hands of a few and creates massive social disruption.
It's the tortoise and the hare, but the hare is a hedge fund manager who is burning down the forest as he runs.
Laughs. That's a vivid image, but yes. There's also the concept of enshittification, that term Cory Doctorow coined.
Love that word. Explain it.
Platforms start out great. They're good to their users to build an audience, then they get big, and they start being good to their business customers to make money, and finally they turn on everyone and just try to extract as much value as possible for themselves, making the platform worse in the process.
We've all seen this happen.
If AI is purely profit-driven, will it stay a great tutor? Or will it eventually just try to sell us stuff? A utility model might actually protect the quality of the tool better than a profit model in the long run.
That's true. If my water company tried to pivot to video, I'd be annoyed.
Yeah.
I just want water. I don't want ads in my water.
Exactly.
Okay, objection number 3. And this is the one I think most listeners are shouting at their device right now. But wait, there are IBISIC free version? I could use ChatGPT for free. I can use Claude for free. It wrote my wedding vows. It's fine. Isn't that enough?
The source comes down harder on this than anything else. Tiered access is not universal access. It says this is the most insidious argument of all.
Why not? It's free. Anyone with an internet connection can use it.
Because of the concept of upgrade pressure. The free versions are intentionally degraded. They are not just older models. They are actively made worse. They are slower. They have smaller context windows, meaning they can't remember as much of the conversation. They aren't as smart. They hallucinate more.
They are the dumb versions. They're lobotomized. They're a marketing tool.
They are structured to make you want to pay. The source calls this product segmentation. But think about the implication for education. If you are a student using the free version and you are competing against a student whose parents pay for the pro version.
The pro student has a PhD tutor available 24/7. The free student has a slightly confused intern who forgets your noun every 5 minutes.
Exactly. It creates market stratification. The source argues that when something is a genuine right like voting or basic education, there are no tiers. You don't get a gold-class voting booth that counts your vote twice.
Well, you're not supposed to anyway.
You're not supposed to. You don't get a premium public school where you pay extra to have a teacher who actually knows math. The promise is a universal baseline.
So the existence of the free tier is actually proof that it's a product, not a utility. Because a utility shouldn't have a premium version of the basic necessity.
Right. You don't get premium water from the tap that hydrates you better than the free water. Water is water. A right is a right. It's for everyone, or it's not a right.
I really hadn't thought about it that way. I always looked at the free tier as a gift. Oh, how nice of them to give us anything. But the source frames it as a trap. It's a gateway drug that ensures you are always second class unless you pay up.
It solidifies the inequality. It makes inequality the default state of the system and then congratulates itself for being generous.
Okay, so we've established the problem. We have a utility trapped in a product's body. We have a constitutional issue disguised as a business model. But how do we get from here to there? The source has a section called the mechanism of change. And it doesn't seem to think the companies will just wake up one day and be nice.
No. The source is very clear. It's quite cynical about this. It says, how does dismantling happen? Not through voluntary corporate goodwill. That's not on the table.
So regulation. The government steps in and breaks them up.
The source says, not through regulation alone. It points to something more organic, more bottom-up. It points to integration and structural mechanics.
Structural mechanics. That sounds distinct. He sounds almost physical, like a law of physics. What does that mean?
It brings us back to the classroom. The source calls this the classroom forcing function. Imagine a near-future scenario, or honestly, a present-day scenario in some wealthy districts. AI tools become standard infrastructure. They are the tutors. They are the writing assistants. They are the research partners.
Okay, so every kid needs one to do their homework.
Yeah.
Just like they need a pencil or a laptop today. It's assumed.
Right. Now imagine a public school where half the kids have the pro version because their parents can afford the $20 a month, and half the kids have the free degraded version because their parents can't.
The teacher can't teach. You can't assign a project. It's impossible.
Exactly. The system breaks. The source argues schools cannot function with inequality baked into the technology layer. You can't assign a project that requires the capabilities of the pro model like code, a website for this book report, if half the class is locked out, or using a tool that hallucinates the code and fails.
So the institution hits a breaking point. It's not about ideology. It's about simple function. The classroom stops working.
The source argues that this inequality becomes intolerable. It becomes visible and measurable. Students with access to frontier AI assistants develop capabilities at rates that leave others behind. You will see it in the test scores. You will see it in college admissions.
And when parents see that gap,
When parents see that their kid is falling behind, not because they aren't smart, but because they have the dumb AI, the pressure builds. Pitchforks at the PTA meeting. The school board gets flooded.
this reminds me of the electricity analogy the source uses again here, which is so good.
Yes. Electricity started as a luxury. Rich people had light bulbs. Poor people had candles. For a while, that was fine. But as society started to run on electricity, as factories and businesses and schools needed it, it became infrastructure.
Universal provision became necessary, not because the electric companies were charitable,
They weren't.
but because societal function required it.
Exactly. You couldn't run a modern city if only half the buildings had power. The tram system wouldn't work, the factories wouldn't work, refrigeration wouldn't work. The source predicts AI is approaching this same threshold. The pedagogical advantage, the teaching advantage, is too big to ignore.
So the change comes from the bottom up.
Bottom-up pressure. Teachers seeing what's possible. Students being denied access. Communities recognizing the lockout. The source predicts that private tiered models will eventually transform into public utilities or get replaced by alternatives because the market, the society won't accept the stratification. It becomes politically untenable.
It's like, eventually, the dam breaks. The friction becomes too high. The unfairness becomes too obvious.
This isn't idealism, it's structural mechanics. I love that line. The more essential AI becomes, the less we can tolerate it being paywalled. The pressure to make it a utility becomes overwhelming.
So we are heading toward a collision. On one side, the business models of Anthropic and OpenAI, who have promised their investors massive returns. On the other side, the structural needs of the education system and the workforce.
And this leads us to the demands. The source ends with a call to action. It's not just an observation, it's a manifesto.
Let's go through these demands. Who needs to do what? Because usually these things end with, we should all think about this. This seems more specific, more targeted.
Much more specific. First, the companies. Anthropic, OpenAI, Google. The demand is recognize frontier AI as a utility. Acknowledge that enclosing this capability violates organic principles.
That's a big ask. That's asking them to walk away from trillions of dollars. Hey, stop trying to make maximum profit. Hey, accept that you're a water company, not a luxury brand.
It is. But the source argues that even if it's legal, they need to recognize it's wrong. It's a call for moral leadership, to choose to be on the right side of history before they are forced to be.
What about institutions, schools, universities, libraries?
Their job is to reject tiered access. The source says, demand universal provision as a condition of integration. Basically, schools should say to these companies, we will not put your tool in our classrooms unless every student gets the same powerful version. No pro-free divide, all or nothing.
Use their collective bargaining power. We represent millions of students. Give us the utility price or we walk.
Exactly. Or we will pool our resources and fund our own open source alternative. They need to draw a hard line.
What about society at large? What do we do? All of us.
We need to clarify what we mean by rights. The source has a powerful line. Rights require infrastructure. Infrastructure requires public commitment.
I like that. You can't just say everyone has a right to learn code and then not build the schools or the digital infrastructure to teach it. A right without a remedy isn't a right at all.
Talk is cheap. Infrastructure is expensive. If we believe it's a right, we have to pay for it as a public good. That means taxes. That means public funding. That means treating it like the interstate highway system.
And finally, from individuals, from you and me and everyone listening.
We need to understand the stakes. This isn't about fair pricing. It's not about whether $20 is too much or too little. That's the wrong conversation. It's about who controls the tools of human development.
Are we optimizing for private gain or for human potential?
That is the final choice presented by the source, the binary choice. There is no third way.
It really does boil it down to two options. Education as product versus education as utility.
Access as privilege versus access as...
Right. The perpetuation of advantage versus the possibility of equity.
It's stark. And there isn't really a middle ground. You have to pick a side.
It is. You know, looking back at the confession that started this whole thing, the founder says, I built something that codes better than all alternatives. And then I chose profit over principle.
And then they point the finger at the real world. Anthropic built something that teaches better than previous alternatives, and then chose the same.
It's a challenge. It's throwing the gauntlet down. It's asking, are we okay with this? Is this the world we want to build?
The source leaves us with this lingering question. The founder made a choice. Anthropic made a choice. But the real question isn't why they made it. We know why. Money. Survival, standard practice.
Yeah, the reasons are obvious.
The question is whether we, collectively, will allow that choice to stand.
That is the question. Because if this really is the new literacy, if this really is the new reading and writing, then letting a few companies decide who gets to learn it is. Well, it's terrifying. It feels like a form of feudalism.
It's a surrender of our future. It's selling our birthright for a monthly subscription fee.
Wow, okay. That is a lot to think about. This document, AI literacy, from private product to public utility. It really flips the script on how we look at these chatbots. They aren't just cool gadgets. They aren't just products. They are the classroom of the future.
And the classroom shouldn't have a VIP entrance.
Exactly. Thank you so much for walking us through this. This was a heavy one, but a necessary one.
My pleasure. It's the most important conversation we can be having right now.
And to you, listening, ask yourself, is that subscription you're paying for a product? Or are you renting a Ray face? Think about it. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
See you next time.